I wanted to talk a little bit more about this bases loaded injury model and how to think about risk factors. A risk factor means that if you have that trait or that characteristic, or you undergo that behavior, you do that behavior, you're more likely to be injured. And even though risk factors don't predict injury, we know that they're correlated, they're related. When we're looking at injuries in general, the reason that it's such an epidemic, especially among younger kids, is because we ignore the basic stuff. And this loaded bases loaded injury model helps explain it a little bit better. So for the podcast audience, if you're not watching this, I have a picture of a diamond. It's a cartoon, and it's a pitcher on the mound. Injury is up to bat, and then there are three runners in position to score. The bases are loaded, and above each runner are the words workload or diet or sleep. And those represent the risk factors, the injury risk factors that could eventually score, or in other words, lead to injury. So think about being in a game. You're a pitcher, okay? Every time that you play a game or you train or you partake in sport in general, and you have bad sleep or bad diet or your workloads are bad, every time that's the case, you're starting with a runner on. And so that just means you're increasing the chance that the other team scores. In our case, that means you're increasing the chance of having an injury. Can you strike this guy out, the next guy that comes up? Sure. Can you strike three guys out in a row? Yeah. But the point is, every time that you undergo a behavior or you participate in something that increases your chance of injury, you're putting yourself in a high risk position. In other words, you're allowing the other team an opportunity to score. Can you get out of the inning? Yeah, absolutely. But think about it the other way. The other end of the spectrum is you can't get out of the inning. 20 pitches in, 30 pitches in, you cannot get out of the inning, because this doesn't just stop with the workloads and the diet. That's when we start getting into more risk factors. Let's say that you're weak because you don't lift. That's going to lead to more fatigue. Well, weakness and fatigue are also risk factors for injury. So those are another two runners on. But it doesn't end there. What if you try to get quote unquote extra work in all the time? On top of that, you have bad throwing mechanics. On top of that, you play in a bunch of games. The point that I'm making is that every time you try to perform or play with one of these runners on, then you are putting yourself at risk to get injured. And eventually, if you put enough runners on, it's going to be too much. You put your body into high stress situations constantly, and you're eventually, potentially, well, that's what we see in our practice anyway, going to be injured, or the other team's going to score. And this just goes on and on. So the next graphic here is pitcher and catcher, bad shoulder mobility, bad shoulder strength. Those are more runners that are on. And it goes on and on and on. But it starts with this idea of workloads, diet, and sleep. So what you don't want to do is start with a bunch of runners on. Can you get out of the inning? Yes. But are you putting yourself and the defense into a high pressure situation that might result in scoring, AKA an injury? Also, yes. So I wanted to expand a little bit on that model. Hopefully that makes sense.